Carol's going to try as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, here we go. Got it.
Okay. Yeah, Carol's not here, and we'll just, I guess, wait. She hasn't told me that she's trying to get in.
There's somebody else missing too. I can't think of what her name is.
Sandra's muted.
Yes, yeah. Sandra Trexler just had to, well, she's muted right now, but
But there's somebody else.
I don't think so. Karen Ritchie was in the last class, but she's not taking this time.
Okay, that she's.
Yeah, she's not taking it this time, so taking this course. But she's got stuff going on right now with holidays and stuff. But, okay. I haven't heard anything from Carol. No, nothing. Okay. Hopefully she'll come in, but we're recording right now, so we'll move forward then. I'll just start out sharing some of the things I put in my journal this week, just things that I kind of jotted down in regards to session 4. God is for everyone, God is for all, God has come to save the world. And of course the readings were Ruth and Ruth because Ruth was great grandmother of Jesus, and talking about the Jesse tree, and then the genealogy that Ruth ends with the genealogy of David, and David is an ancestor of Jesus, and of course that's why Mary and Joseph had to go from Nazareth to Bethlehem, because that was David's town. That's where David was from. King David was from. So they had to go down there to register because they were part of that family. That's part of the Christmas story, of course. And,
okay, there we go.
And then and then of course the visit of the wise men, the Magi, they're foreigners, like Ruth, foreigner. What do we have? Here's Carol. Okay, very good. Carol just came in. Okay. Hello, Carol. Hi. Hello. Hi.
Sorry, I got caught in the downpour.
Oh, no.
I hate it when that happens. Tis the season, isn't it? Tis the season.
The car is clean. The car is cleaner now, so that's good.
Oh yeah. And of course we have the shepherds and angels, which, like I said in the video, they were unchurched, unsynagogued, let's say, and they were kind of outsiders. They were Anawim, and so God set it up that way. The first folks to come and pay homage and see this baby child were kind of outsiders. So again, the theme is God is for everyone. It's some of the stuff I put in my journal this week. Some of the things I when I was kind of thinking of this stuff, I at a church I was at, we had hired an artist, a sculptor, to come in and sculpt a living baptismal font. And he was not a believer. He was certainly an outsider, not a believer. And he was 30-ish, 35-ish. He was young. I can say he was young at that age. See? And a very nice person. And he was commissioned to do this baptismal font, and being commissioned to do this work, obviously he would have to do a lot of research, and that's what artists do. When they're commissioned to do something, they really do a lot of book stuff and research and background stuff, and he did that. He was very, very good with the background on baptism, and he he read scripture, he did all these things. And so to shorten this little story up, and it's a true story, the day that the baptismal font was dedicated, he was baptized.
Oh, my.
Wow.
So in a sense, he converted himself,
Oh,
you
wow.
know,
How
who,
about that?
he was the one that was instrumental. Obviously, the congregation helped because he was doing it in that place. It was a beautiful sanctuary. But in the process of doing all this background research to do the sculpting, and it was a live font, so the water kind of came down this little waterfall, which he had sculpted, and it went into a pool. But he was baptized when the font was dedicated. Another experience I wrote in my journal was a story about Kuansia. Kuansia were, this is really early on. This is our first congregation, my wife and I, and Kuansia were Laotians, and that was a time when Lutheran, not Lutheran World Federation, but the Lutheran part of Lutheran. It was at that time, it was Lutheran immigration, and we were the Lutheran Church at that time was inviting many Vietnamese folks and Laotians, Cambodians, such like. And this is during the mid to late 70s, and so Susan and I called up Lutheran Immigration. We said we want to sponsor a Laotian couple. We got a Laotian couple. We just had a couple from Southeast Asia, and so Kuansia came and lived with us for 6 months to a year, and we got them settled along with our congregation. We had a congregation up in northwestern Wisconsin, Indian Head country, and it's about 50-60 miles south of Duluth Superior. It's cold up there. A wonderful congregation, just a wonderful congregation. I should have never left that congregation. It's just wonderful. People were just sweet, and we settled them. Kuansia, to make this short, Kuansia were Buddhists. And the day I left that congregation, I was called into church camping ministry, and by the church. And so the day I left that congregation, Kuansia were baptized Christians. Of course, I've always said, I don't know how you feel about it, but I've always said you can be anything and still be a Buddhist, right? You can be a Lutheran and be a Buddhist. You can be a Presbyterian and be a Buddhist. You can be a Catholic and be a Buddhist. I mean, you can be Jewish and be a Buddhist, because Buddhism is so universal, and the precepts of Buddhism are pretty interesting. But anyway, they were. It wasn't a huge leap for them, so they were baptized, and they did extremely well, in their walk in this country. They gee whiz. By the time we baptized them, I think they had 2 children. I think they ended up having 4 kids. So they did well. Was another thing I wrote in my journal, that I was at I don't think I've shared this with you yet. Maybe I did. I don't think so. I was at a graveside. I was asked to do a graveside service for 3 or 4 men, and it was a friend of theirs who we were doing an interment service for, and I was asked to do it, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't know much about the situation, and I did find out when I got there, the 3 or 4 men were gay men, and they were turned down by all the churches that they had asked to do this service, and this is a while back. This is 15-20 years ago.
Mm.
And I went, and they were and I it was 15-20 years ago, so I'm kind of assuming that their friend died of AIDS. I don't know that for sure, but I was kind of assuming that. But I wasn't judging them for that, but I was just kind of assuming that. But they were so thankful. I mean, I decided that I would bring some hymn books. I didn't know these guys, but I said I really wanted to have something significant for them at the gravesite, and so I brought some hymn books, some hymn lightweight books, nothing heavy, with very traditional hymns like Amazing Grace and those kinds of hymns. And I said, would you like to sing? And they were so filled with gratitude. I mean, just so filled with gratitude to think that somebody would come from the church and minister to them and talk with them and sing with them. And I reminded them that God is for everyone, that God is for all. And another thing I wrote was the church I retired from. I worked 3 or 4 days in a church, St. Andrews in South St. Pete, and that's kind of just a retirement thing that I do. It's 3 or 4 days a week. But the church I retired from is Lutheran Church Good Shepherd in Seminole, Florida. And we had just a fantastic youth group there, a big youth group, and it was and when I went there, it was a 2-pastor congregation, and I went there in 2003. And they asked me if we should call another pastor. I says, well, I don't want somebody that does what I do. What I want is a full-time youth director. And so we hired a full-time youth director. And the first full-time youth director we had, Tom, was fantastic, just fantastic. My philosophy was always to find a youth director who hopefully was married, could be a man or a woman, hopefully was married, had kids, and they weren't going to have any more kids. So I had a long shelf life, And Tom had two kids, and his wife was a school teacher, is a school teacher still, and he was there for 4 or 5 years. He was a member of the congregation, actually. We hired from inside. He was a member of the congregation. And I eventually lost him after 5 years to seminary. He went to Gettysburg Seminary, and he's pastor of the congregation in Tallahassee, where our president, what's her name again? Vice President of the Synod.
Cheryl Stewart. Yeah,
He's
St. Stephen.
He's pastor at St. Stephen, and just a fantastic pastor, just a really, really good pastor.
Nice man.
And yeah, he is. And then we hired another man. Again, we would have hired one man, but this guy comes along, and he was phenomenal, just really good too. And so we had this great youth program, and we always did a live nativity during Advent and right before Christmas, like a week before Christmas. And we always did a live nativity, and people would come from the neighborhood, and we always had this one couple that would come up and give us a check for $1,000. They weren't churched. They said, we like what you're doing with kids. We like what you're doing in the neighborhood, and they'd give us, every year they do this. And then we would have people, we would give out flyers inviting people to come to church Christmas Eve. And people would have this attitude like, you mean we can come? We're welcome. We can actually come. And our youth would say, of course you can come. And our youth director would say, of course you can come. And I would sit on the sidelines, and watch this. And people need to be invited, all people, because again, God is for everyone. And again, I think I wrote my journal. After 9/11, again, in my journal this week, after 9/11, this woman shows up in my office. I was pastoring in Wilmington, North Carolina at the time. And we all know where we were and what we were doing during 9/11. And a week or two after 9/11, a woman by the name of Cindy Cornett walks into my office, knocks, and my secretary administrator invites her in, and we sit down at the table in my office, and she says, I'm Jewish, but she says, I need to be baptized. I asked her why. Well, because of 9/11, I'm not baptized. I know I need to be baptized. I need to be baptized. And I said, okay, if you want to be baptized, we can baptize you. And we baptized her. And so she became a Messianic Jew, of course, And eventually, after a year or two, she became extremely active in the congregation. She got really, really active, and it was she was a joy, just a joy. We can talk about that later. So sometimes sometimes when a Jewish person wants to get baptized, I get a little bit sad because, the Jewish people are part of our faith. They're part of our heritage, and so I always want them to be very serious and know why they're doing what they're doing, because I do not want them to leave the Old Testament behind. I don't want them to leave their tradition behind, because it's so important to our faith, our Judeo-Christian faith. But Cindy did not leave her Jewish tradition behind, and she was just she's just such a great person. Anyway, the reason I sent you the stuff on faith development was because and I'll say a few things about that in a minute, but the reason I sent you that stuff was this is about 25 years ago, and I'm listening to Roy Fox in Pittsburgh. We raised our 4 kids in Pittsburgh. And I'm listening to a talk show host, Roy Fox, who's a Christian, by the way, but it's not a Christian program. It's just a human interest program. But he does talk about his faith somewhat often, but it's not a Christian program. It's simply, how are you doing kind of program. How did your day go? What kind of stories you have to share? What's going on in your life? That kind of thing. More kind of like a Mr. Rogers kind of thing. And remember, Fred Rogers was from Pittsburgh. Fred and I went to the same seminary also. He got his doctorate a few years before I got mine at Pittsburgh Seminary. But I would see him. I'd see Fred often. We'd exchange some words. But Roy Fox one night, they were having this discussion about atheism. And that kind of discussion is always interesting to us because we're all theists, but they were having a discussion about atheism. And is there such a thing as an atheist? And of course, we all know agnostics, people who may be universalists, and who know for sure that there is a God, and but they may not believe that God is personal in a person, say of Christ, of Jesus, and but they believe that there is a God that exists. So Roy Fox is interviewing this atheist this night, and this atheist comes on. He's hardcore, really, really hardcore, and finally he beats his fist on his table where he's calling from, and he says, "Roy, it is my God-given right to be an atheist." The reason and when I thought of that, that's the reason I thought about faith development. Everyone, it doesn't make a difference who we are. If you're an atheist, agnostic, a theist, doesn't make a difference. You're a Catholic or a Presbyterian or Jewish or a Muslim. Everyone, whether they realize it or not, move through a development of faith. It's like educational psych, developmental psych or developmental education. Everyone moves through a developmental process of faith, no matter who they are and what they think and what their background is. I'll say more about that in a second. But the last thing I put in my journal this week was this little story about it's a true story. And one day that I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, and our congregation, it's a large congregation, and it houses Lutheran Campus Ministry and United Campus Ministry. We have a fairly large gymnasium and all-purpose room, and we're right across the street from the field house, exactly across the street. And I was active in the choir. I sang in the choir, and we had a wonderful choir of about 50, 60 people. And it was big enough so that the choir director wouldn't miss me, see. So on Wednesday nights, I would sneak off to the field house to watch Division I basketball. And I did that to the point I really, really sometimes riled up the choir director, So But anyway, so we had a lot of students come through. So one evening, this student comes, knocks on the door because the secretary administrator's not there now. And I'm kind of just there and I have my door open. I think I just finished an early meeting and she walks in and she is in tears. And she said, I just did something that I'm going to regret for the rest of my life. She was just totally shaken. And she said, I had a fight with my roommate. And she said, I just regret what I did, but we had this brawl. I mean, we didn't fight physically, but we had this screaming match. And she says, I can't remember what it was about, but we just fought and fought and fought. And I was so angry with her because of something she said or did. And so I stole her credit card and went on a shopping spree. This is true. It's really happened. And I maxed out her credit card on her. I can't remember at this point how much she had, probably $4,000 or $5,000, something like that. I maxed out her credit card on purpose. I was so mad. And she said, and I said, the first words out of my mouth were, you really need to go to the police station and turn yourself in. And and I said, I'll go with you, but you really need to turn yourself in. I mean, you really need to fess up. And the sooner you do that, the better. I mean, the way things go. I mean, we Lutherans, understand that there is grace and forgiveness, but we also have to pay the penalty for the consequences of our actions, right? And I think Lutheran Christians or Christian Lutherans understand that very, very well, that there's always forgiveness, there's always reconciliation, there's always grace, but we still have to pay the consequences. And so I taught my 4 kids that very early in life when they forget their school lunch. And they're going to have to borrow food at school because there are consequences for what we do, right? And even though there's grace and forgiveness, there's also tough love, and there's also, we have to sometimes pay for our mistakes. At least we should. Anyway, so I said, and besides that, I said that I did share with her that the district attorney was a member of our congregation. And he offered to sit down with us. I called him because he would call me. He would always call me late at night and say, would you go with me to this person's house because he is being, well, in Florida, we call it Baker acted. In Pennsylvania, we called it 302. It was a 302. And I was a 302 delegate. I worked with emergency room physicians to, I'll use the Florida term, to Baker Act people doing involuntary committals. And so John would always call me up like at 9 or 10 at night and say, would you go with me? I have this thing I've got to do with involving a 302 or Baker Act. So I called him and he came over, and it was very nice that he ministered to this young woman. And that was it. I was pretty much out of it then. He was able to move her over to the authorities, and I don't know the rest of it from there. And about 6 months went by, and at that point, I just felt it was confidential, and with John, the district attorney, how he worked this thing was his business and her business, and not my business at that point. So 6 months later, my wife and I are having lunch at Wrightsville Beach at a place called the Dockside. We're just having lunch together, just a little break, and I see her. I recognize her, and I see her, and she recognizes me. She's not serving our table, but she's a server at the restaurant. and she sees me and I see her, and she comes over and asks her how she's doing. And she said, she says, I'm doing well. She said, as you see, I'm working and I've just about paid the penalty for my sin. She says, I'm doing well. And she thanked me and also John for our intercessions. And she said, I'm doing really, really, really good. And thank you. And I'm okay. And I'm really sorry for what I did. You know, so again, the church was there for her. You know, and I don't really know much about her church background. I don't know if she went to church. I don't know if she was raised in the church. But she thanked me and she thanked John just profusely because of the intercession. The reason that that I wanted to just give you the faith development stuff is because we all is that saved by the bell? because we all go through a developmental process, whether we know it or not, and whether we nurture our faith or not, we all go through a developmental process. And one of the things that concerns me most, and I'm sure it concerns you a lot, is stage one, because when we're 2 to 6, our first image of God is mom and dad. And I see, and we all see out there how mom and dad treat some of their kids. We all see some very, very bad treatment, extremely bad treatment. Abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. I've seen kids shaken up by their parents in doctors' offices. You know, the kinds of things that one sees. I believe in firm, loving discipline, but I don't believe in abusing children and or physically abusing or emotionally abusing kids. And so a child's first image of God is one of as a judge, is a mean old judge, right? And that concerns me. It really concerns me because of that. Because kids have, you know, like I say, they're fertile imaginations, and they believe that the Goliath slayer should be on their side and slaying the bad people outside the home. You see, so it's certainly a concern. Any comments about that? You see that too? You concerned? I'm very concerned about that.
Marcus Borg says his first impression of God was based on the minister he had. I don't know what segment of the Lutheran church it was, but it was Lutheran. Black robe, tall, finger shaker. Fingers, you know, not quite in your face because he was up at the pulpit, but and it was frightening and incredibly judgmental, or so the child heard it at any rate. And you know, you think back on things like that, it could have happened twice, and the child internalized it as the way it is, and in his mind it became always. But and of course Borg moved very far away from that. But every time I have come across that in one of his books, that reference, I think that that man didn't mean to create the image that he created. You know, he wanted to be firm, but I'm sure he didn't want to come across as mean, cruel, but that we do that when we don't think through the way we react with other people or interact with other people.
Yeah, and I believe that my interpretation anyway of the money changers at the table when Jesus, you know, enters Jerusalem, and he was angry, and I think I've said this before, but he was angry because the intimation there is that God is an angry judge, and you have to appease him to be saved. You have to appease God to get grace. But grace, salvation, grace, love is a priceless treasure. And again, it happens during the Reformation, Martin Luther was really upset about the same thing, that with indulgences, that, well, you've got to pay God to get yourself saved, because God is a judge. He's an angry judge. And so you have to appease him. So, yeah.
And Pastor Chip, I didn't quite understand the breakdowns of 2 to 6, 7 to 12, but now because your explanation made it clear, they are age brackets that you're really referring to.
Yeah, those are rough notes. I was just writing rough notes. And when I wrote those rough notes, at that point, I wasn't really conscious to think I was going to send them to you, but I thought, well, maybe you'd like that. Yeah, 7 to 12 is really interesting, because what's fair is fair. We've all been at the ball field with our young tykes, with our young men and women, girls and boys, and we hear kids screaming, also parents. It's not fair. It's not fair.
What I wanted to follow up was
Go ahead, John.
and I think a lot of it has to do with where the church was in your life when you got to that stage. And for myself, the church that I was part of early on was pretty strict. It was a German-based church. The pastor looked very ominous to me, and tall, and very much up front with the older type garb on. And it was and you had these strict rules. You could not commune until you were confirmed. And one of the boys in my confirmation class snuck in one time and got communion, and they read the riot act to him. It's like, how much has changed, and how much the church has, I'll use the word softened, more inviting, more accepting, more open, has really improved the faith a great deal. Now, you have your own experiences. Maybe they don't dovetail with mine, but I think that is the way I viewed it.
Yeah, well, as I say, that's a real concern I have, and I know there were churches and Lutheran churches that were that way. I have to say that my first pastor that I remember was Pastor Tingley. I can't remember his first name, but he was a joy, and he was a walking grace retreat. So I never experienced that, but I see it, and I know people like you and others who experienced that even in Lutheran church, in the 50s and 60s, or whenever it happened to be. So, yeah. Anybody else? Now, 7 to 12 is an interesting time, because again, this whole fairness thing, piece of cake, Mary, you divide, and Joe gets first piece, right? And but it's a flat literal stage. Kids at that age, the stories are literal. They understand the stories very literally, and the anthropomorphic nature of God. God is up there somewhere, and he's got a long flowing beard and white robe, probably, stuff like that. But they love that age, and I did too. I loved the Saturday matinees. I'd go to Saturday matinee. They're called PTA movies, and I'd go every Saturday. And there were always black hats and white hats, right? And the white hats were the good guys, the black hats were the bad guys, right? And so that age gets a kick out of that kind of thing. And also that age they love the law stories. They love the David and Goliath story, but they don't like really the parable of the workers or the prodigal son. They're kind of wondering, well, how do they get away with that anyway? And it's just that age. It's just the age. That's all. I think stage 3 is really interesting because it's 13 plus, 18 plus, and I call that kind of a more institutional stage. I believe what the church teaches. I believe the church believes. I believe what my pastor says I should believe. My priest, my rabbi. I believe what other people tell me to believe, so I know you've probably had this experience, and Carol Dunn has this attitude too. She has this thing about her. See, so if people in one of my classes, I'm not talking about diaconia, but a Bible study class or a topical class I would teach, and they would ask me, Pastor, what do you think about this subject? What do you think? And my answers, like Carol's, will always be two parts, you see. Because Carol's kind of a revolutionary, you know. He's kind of right on the edge, you know. She's kind of right on the edge. So I would way more than I. But so I would say, well, this is what the church teaches, but this is what I believe. Now, sometimes I believe what the church teaches, and probably most of the time in the ELCA. But there are times when I don't agree what my boss says. So if you don't agree with your boss, I'm not talking about God now. I'm talking about the ELCA, which is it's an institution in the world. Even though it's a religious institution, sometimes I don't agree. So I'll tell my class, I don't agree with that. But this is what the church teaches. So if you want to be in line with the church, this is what you do. But if you're going to have your own opinion about that, and it's not the church's, your pastor's opinion, then you're in stage 4. You see, then you're in stage 4. So
Well, I think that no matter where we are in our faith journey or our personal life journey, that we slip in and out of these stages, you know,
I think we do.
based on what
Sure.
we're going through at that point in time.
Yeah.
Because I find myself, you know, when things get tougher, rather than clinging to my personal belief, I slip back into this stage 3, what I was taught during this time, and you cling tight to it because it's secure and it's, you know, formation, it's firm.
Yeah. Very good comments. Yeah, very, very good comments. Yeah.
The other thing I think is difficult for many of us, and especially churches, regardless of the synod they belong to, is when the ELCA comes out with a social statement, you know, how many people fall in line and say, that's the way we're going to follow? And I don't think everybody does that.
Oh, no, of course not. You know, a number of people in the last week or two, and my going around and talking with people, friends, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you've had these conversations too. And they say, well, what do you think of Roe versus Wade and what's happened the last couple of weeks? What do you think about that? I only have one comment. And my comment is, if a man wants to talk about Roe versus Wade and all this stuff, he's got to have a vasectomy first. Then he can talk. You know, if you get a vasectomy first, you have no business talking about women's rights, about what women do, about what women want to do. And I'm not pro-life or pro-choice at all. I'm pro-thinking, and I like to think through issues. And it's just horrible what goes on out there in the kind of thinking that, you know, it's not healthy because it's become politicized. See, and whenever something becomes politicized, the thinking gets not clear any longer, because politics is always for the masses, you know. So anyway, but I just think that men have to get a vasectomy before they talk about anything happening with women's rights.
I'd have a lot less trouble with the.
Oh no, we get Carol going here.
No, this will be gentle and quick. I'd have a lot less trouble with it if the legislatures nationally, as well as in the state, provided prenatal child care, postnatal child care for children, adequate food and medical care, you know, all of the things that the woman and the child will need, because the state has forced her to go through a pregnancy she didn't want.
Yeah, I don't believe in abortion. However, I think it's a woman's right to make those decisions. It's a difficult thing. But yeah, your comments are good, Carol. Your comments are very good. So that stage 3, people who really feel comfortable in stage 3, and that's okay. You know, none of these stages are better than another. You know, like I say in the last comment, growing in faith is a gift, not an accomplishment. There are no accomplishments in moving from stage to stage and moving up to 6. That's not some kind of a hierarchical accomplishment that we do. People in stage 3 feel they make excellent institutional people like military leaders, very, very good because they feel comfortable in a hierarchical system. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with it at all. Now, stage 4, what's interesting with stage 4 is I see it, God is, there's a shift there from home to university to college, military, first job, first apartment. And so now in stage 4, there are other authorities competing for you agreeing with them. So like your college English teacher or history teacher will say, we may not be religious at all. And he or she will talk down religion or maybe your religion. Not normally we will not do that, but they will make comments like, my discipline is the best discipline and it's authoritative over any other kind of thing that you do. And therefore, I'm going to give you 6 hours of homework every day. And that's the most important homework you're going to do, and way more important than the other subjects that you have. You know, it's that kind of competing. I'm using hyperbole now. I'm exaggerating, but there are all these people and groups competing for your beliefs, and like I say, their authorities arguing. But there's a shift now from conformity to individuality. Now we're individuals, and we now have our identity was given at one time, but now it's made our own. We are our own people now. We still have the gift of our parents' identity, but now we grow into our own identity. Like I say, they're in childhood, identity is a gift from others, and identity is made one's own. So it's a moving away from all the things that we've learned from parents and people who we really respect, adults, and now we move into our own adulthood and we move into our own identity. It's sort of like a marriage, isn't it? We get married and we form a new family, but we don't leave our parents behind. What we want to do is have our own kids marvel at their grandparents and great grandparents. We want them to be a part of their identity, but we also want them to have their own identity, a new identity, and subsume parents and grandparents and great grandparents' identity into their own lives. You know, so that makes that an interesting stage. And again, stage 5, don't confuse the map with the territory. I think the most interesting thing there is resurrection happens historically, and we believe that the resurrection happened historically, but the resurrection also can happen internally in our hearts and our minds, right? And I use this thing with Mary in the garden. I think that's Gospel of John, isn't it? Rabboni. The resurrection, she sees the resurrection, but now the resurrection happens in her heart, in her whole person. The heart is the portal of love. And a felt sense of the world and God, and knowing beyond reason, you see, knowing beyond reason. That's a personal note there, that PhD psychologist thing there. I had a member of one of my parishes, and he was kind of an agnostic. He was your typical psychiatrist, psychologist guy, and kind of hardcore. And I never really knew him that well, but he attended church every Sunday with his family. His wife was a sweetheart. His kids were bread and butter kids. And he came to council meeting one night. He wasn't on the council, but he came to the council meeting one night. He said, "Can I have 5 minutes during the meeting?" And I said, and the president of the congregation said, "Sure." And he said, I just want to, he had a bout with cancer, and he went into remission. And it really wasn't even what I would call real serious cancer. It was very treatable. But he came to the council meeting one night. He says, I want to thank this congregation for ministering to me when I was going through my treatment. And he said, I also want you to know that even though, I'm pretty hardcore when it comes to Jesus and the resurrection, he says, I love this congregation. He says, even before I had cancer, I loved this congregation. And the reason I love this congregation is because you love me exactly the way I am. And therefore I love you, and I love what this congregation does. I love the outreach that this congregation does. And he just, this confession that he made was just terrific, just terrific, because he was kind of an outsider. He was kind of on the fringe. He was a liminal person. He was on the boundary, of things. And to come in and say that was really, really sweet, I thought, because again, God is for everyone. There's a place for everyone.
I want to go back to your comment regarding the resurrection. The resurrection account, I think, is tantamount to what the church is all about. During the 7 Sundays of Easter, we always say, Christ is risen, he is risen indeed, hallelujah. That is the key message that our church offers, because we believe in a Christ that has beat the cross. He has risen from the dead. And that's the whole thing in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Peck, Dr. Scott Peck. He just died 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, but his claim to fame, he wrote The Road Less Traveled and a lot of other books. But he was a psychiatrist, an MD, and for a long time he was an agnostic, and he went through life and he was a phenomenal psychiatrist, and finally one day he wanted to be baptized. And the reason he was baptized is, he said, because, John, exactly what you just said. He said, because I believe what happened at the resurrection. I believe it because the big difference between Christianity and all other religions, all other world religions, is forgiveness, reconciliation, because of the resurrection. And he said the exact same thing you did. Central. Very good. And then I have a dream. And I use Martin Luther King Jr. and even Martin Luther and Gandhi and Mother Teresa. But be clear on this, that we all probably know people in stage 6. And maybe you are one of those people in stage 6. We all know them or have known them. Everyday, ordinary people who have a dream, and do not have. You do not have to be a great leader, I say, though. We all know someone like this. I love Mother Teresa because when at the point at Mother Teresa's death, before she died, and I love to tell young people this. I love to tell our young rock stars this. That Mother Teresa got more fan mail than any other person in the world. More fan mail than the Pope, more fan mail than the President of the United States, more fan mail than any rock star. She got more fan mail than anybody in the world. And the reason I think Mother Teresa is a good example of stage 6 only is because she was Roman Catholic, but she had 2 funerals. She had a Roman Catholic funeral, and she had not a Buddhist funeral, a religion in India. I forget, what is it? Hindu funeral. She had 2 funerals. Hindu funeral, and she had a Roman Catholic funeral. And so she was beyond religion. You see, she was living beyond religion. She was still a good Roman Catholic, but she also had a Hindu funeral, and to me that's very interesting. Again, I think I think the most important thing about faith development is it's not some kind of award we get, accomplishment we get because we move into a different stage. It's not that at all. All the stages are good to be in, and that's why I like Sandra's comment about the fact that we can move from one stage to another, and we do, we certainly do. Yeah. Okay, your comments. What any comments that you have on anything we've talked about, or anything that you've thought about in your journals, or thinking, or talking to other people about faith, about images in terms of your faith. Anything you want to add? Before I forget, session 5 is God uses those who we least expect, 2 kingdoms. We'll talk about that next week. And again, I'm going to be in a different spot. I'm going to be up in Pennsylvania, Allegheny Mountains, but I know where I'm going to. I actually know already where I have high-speed internet, so don't worry, I will show up. I will be there. And hopefully 10 minutes before I need to be. So for the good of the order, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind? Anybody?
Well, I guess I was just wondering what stage or age children look at God as being a gift giver. That if they want a bicycle, they pray for a bicycle. If they want a puppy, they pray for a puppy. You know, what stage would that be?
What do you think? What do you think, folks?
I think that some people never get out of it, because I remember the first mother's prayer group I was in, and I was in with another pastor's wife. She was in a different denomination, and she decided that it was a worthy cause for her to pray every day for a pool in their house, because they would have all the neighborhood kids would come to her house, and she would have the appropriate environment for this. She also had 4 of her own children. So she prayed every day, and she got a pool at one point in time, and she was convinced that God gave her that gift for that reason. I don't know.
Well, we remember that book that came out 10 years ago or so. Oh, what was that called? Oh, maybe The Greatest Gift. I can't remember, but it was a book about visualization. Remember, and all.
The source.
Pardon?
The book was the source.
Yeah, the source. That's right. And in fact, I did a class on it because we had a group that was very interested in all kinds of things and like that. And I mean all sorts of things. We did something. Okay, somebody want to come in? Okay, John. Okay. So I did a little class. It was only like a 2-session class on it. I showed the video, the DVD of it, and this whole thing about visualization that all successful people visualize, and put pictures of things they want or desire in their vocation, profession, or whatever, like the swimming pool. And I'm sure there's something to that. But to go back, Peg, to your question, what stage do kids do that? I mean, you're talking about children. I think adults will do that too, but children probably will do that. I don't know. What do you think? Starting at age 4 or 5, they'll wish for something.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an educator. Now my wife would know, she's an educator, but I would struggle with that, with the age kinds of things with that. But I would say maybe 4 or 5 years old, that they would, I wish. The classic one is, I wish I had a puppy. That can happen at 3. I wish I had a puppy. Parents' comment is,
Well,
you're not going to get a puppy until you can take care of it.
If
And then it
wishing
never
for a
happened.
pool- If wishing for a pool was all you had to do, I would have had one by now. So just saying.
Right.
Yeah, we talk about the Bausch book again, and I mentioned, as soon as you said that, I said, I recall reading that something about what he said. 133, he said, we are beings full of desire. We desire people and we desire things.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes the things overwhelm us. And then we have too many things. And now, like, when you start downsizing, you realize, like, what am I going to do with all
Yeah,
this stuff?
that's right. Remember, Deuteronomy 6, Moses says, the trouble with you is you're too religious. Remember, we talked about that last week.
Yeah.
But okay, here's the thing. Here's kind of in addition to that, you know the old comment, be very careful what you pray for, you may get it, right?
Yep.
Now, do you have any stories? Where you prayed for something and you got it and then you regretted it? Oh, you just regretted it. Man, I got a friend who I have, he's deceased now, but I have this friend and we were really close, 30 years ago or so. He was a phenomenal guy. And he would always talk about his first marriage. He wanted to date and marry this woman. And finally it happened. He prayed about it. And finally it happened. And he said it was the worst thing I ever did. It was the absolute worst thing I ever did. And I never had that experience in my life with a bride, with a wife. But have you ever prayed for something and then you got it and you thought, oh my, I don't really want this. I mean, it ever happened to you?
God doesn't give you what you want. God only gives you what you need. That's what we were told.
Yeah.
Well, even that can be questionable. There are people who are hungry in the world, so they're not getting fed. But I was thinking about Sandra's friend in the pool. I had a pool in Michigan, and talk about the height of stupidity. They have one in Michigan. Anyway, I wonder how she felt after every kid in the neighborhood used every towel she had. Came in to use the restroom and just tore it up and left water everywhere. Just, wondering, did she really want that? After she got it, was it what she thought it would be?
Right. Mhm.
But was this person satisfied? I mean, was she okay with all this?
Oh, this was just someone I was in a prayer group with.
Okay.
She wasn't a personal friend of mine, so I didn't really follow up on all that.
Because it's interesting, when Susan and I were raising our kids, we raised 2 kids and we adopted 2 kids, and of course, it was a different time. It was before 9/11. Everything's changed since then. But we wanted the kids at our house. We wanted the kids at our house because we wanted to know our kids' friends and who they were socializing with. But there is a line all the time where sometimes that'll get old, too. That will get old. I remember walking we had a mother-in-law suite in this house, and we didn't have a mother-in-law living there at the time, and it was a big room with a totally handicapped access bathroom, and my son Jason, he had three guy friends over, and they're all in that room, and it was Friday to Saturday. And being a guy, I wouldn't walk in if it was my daughter's, party, a little thing going on. But it was Saturday morning, it was already like 10 o'clock, and I didn't hear any stirring. And I walk in there only to have a pillow like fly right in my face. And the guy who threw it, Bob, a great guy, bread and butter guy, and he just apologized all over the place. He says, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that, they were having a little pillow fight. But and these guys were already like in 10th, 11th grade. I mean, they were what boys do,
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, I can see where this woman would have loved to have the kids in the pool, because now she knows her kids' friends. And in fact, our kids' friends would tell Susan stuff that they wouldn't tell their parents, and because that was the kind of home we had. And Susan would say, just, if you're going to tell me something, just be aware, I'm not going to lie for you. If your parents ask me, I'm not going to lie for you. So be careful what you tell me,
Oh,
So I'm wondering how this woman in this support group actually felt about that all going on. Indeed. Okay, anything for the good of the order before I do a benediction? I'll see you next Tuesday at 3:30. Yeah, I'm gonna still be in Eastern time. So
Our final papers are due next Tuesday.
yeah, it's a kind of a soft thing though, because I'm still going to be. But as soon as I start getting them, I have carols. I have carols already, but it's on the 12th. The papers I have, even though I'm where I am, I'll start reading, and getting back to you, because I don't like to rush through those. I like to take my time.
You
Yeah.
want you want our final paper and the 5
Journal.
journal.
No, just all
whatever.
I want is the final paper. I don't want your journals, because your journals are private to you.
Oh.
I just want
So
your paper,
just the final paper.
final paper, and the date of the 12th is pretty soft because I'm going to be away anyway. But as close to the 12th as you can possibly make it is good, because then you're done with it. Then you can move on to
Okay.
other things or other courses. So
Okay.
I'll see you on Tuesday. I'm going to be in the same time zone, so that'll make it easy. So the Lord be with you.
And
And
also with you.
with you.
Also you.
May the Lord bless us and keep us. May the Lord make his face shine on us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord look upon us with favor and give us his peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 Have a good evening.
Amen. You too, Dave.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Oh, wait a minute.
Bye, everybody.
Hold on.
I'll send recordings out to those who need them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.